समझ नहीं आ रहा अपने सैलरी इंक्रीमेंट का क्या करूं।
बेटा इतना क्या सोच रहा है? अपने म्यूचुअल फंड्स के एसआईपी का टॉप अप करा ले। दिस इज द राइट टाइम।
क्या? समझ में नहीं आया।
बेटा इतना क्या सोच रहा है? अपने म्यूचुअल फंड्स का एसआईपी टॉपअप करा ले। दिस इज द राइट टाइम।
अब समझा।
Mutual fund investments are subject to market risks. Read all scheme related documents carefully.
It is just about barely a fortnight since Donald Trump took over as President of America. And what did he do? He made many promises during his election campaign and said, this time take me seriously because I will implement them right away. So from the moment of his inauguration, he's been signing that flurry of executive orders, not going to Congress, not bothering with any formalities, basically exercising the powers that the US president has, but also pushing at the boundaries of that power. So all you see is this televised signing of these orders and kach, 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 kach. He goes on with this felt pen. Now, you can divide these orders or these actions into two categories. One is what he's doing domestically, and second, what he's doing internationally. More of the action, in fact, where he's got some bang for the buck, that's been on the international arena, because he's gone after two of his neighbors, that is Canada and Mexico, with heavy tariffs, 25% tariffs. That means anything coming into the US from these countries gets a 25% tax. For these two countries, exports to America are almost their entire exports, almost their entire trade. I'm not going into exact data, but it's almost like 75 to 80% like that. In case of Canada, it's about 40% of the GDP in a way. Now, if those exports become too expensive, obviously buyers in America will shift to sources from other countries, and if that happens, these countries' economy will really suffer. So that is what he's done there. He's also flung a 10% tariff at China. However, it's important to see what he's claiming as the cause for these tariffs. We'll get into that in just a moment. Then at the same time, he's got his Secretary of State, Marco Rubio, a friend of India who's been part of the India caucuses and pro-India groups on the Hill. He's made his first foreign visit, and that is to Panama. Panama is a tiny country to the south of America. It's in southern America. It's a country that owns the Panama Canal. So that is the first foreign visit by the new Secretary of State. And once again, this was a promise that Trump had made, that he will take Panama Canal back one way or the other. Then he's also reopened the issue with Denmark on Greenland, and we'll come to that. Now, what's happening? Two things I told you. One is what's happening at home, domestic. There, he's got some success in the sense that some of his orders are orders because nobody can get around them. He can shut down US aid if he wants to. But in everything he does, you can see, read the art of the deal, because he's always bringing back that idea of the art of the deal. So in each case, he doesn't say it's over forever. Even in US aid, he said this was taken over by radical lunatics, and we are now expelling the radical lunatics. Now, once the radical lunatics are out, quote unquote, radical lunatics are out, we will decide what to do with US aid, which means he's not saying US aid is shut down forever. Again, couple of the other important actions that he's taken domestically. One, he's had to withdraw in very quick time. That was the order where he said the federal government will stop funding a lot of activities, a lot of NGOs, a lot of other organizations. That he decreed with an executive order, and I think within 24 hours figured out there were complications, and many of the organizations or activities that he did not want shut down will get shut down, or this will be too disruptive. So he has put that on hold. The other big executive order he issued, that is denial or withdrawal of the right of citizenship by birth, which is guaranteed under the 14th Amendment in US Constitution. That's been stayed by one court, so that is injuncted, that is over for now. And that's been stayed by a judge who's actually a conservative judge, in the sense that he was appointed by Ronald Reagan. And the judge himself said that I can't believe how can a lawyer argue that this right can be withdrawn. So that tells you that on the domestic side, in spite of all the grandstanding by Elon Musk every day, Trump is getting a pushback on the domestic side. And that will become a contestation as times move on, because then normal politics kicks in, judiciary kicks in, the media, much maligned as it is and much under pressure as it is right now, the legacy media, everybody will kick in. Trump can then say they've all got together against me, some mile hue, right? But contestation is building up on the domestic level. But internationally, he's making waves and he's getting some quick wins. He's making some quick wins, and you can see how he's celebrating. This is the image of himself that he put out on Twitter or Truth Social. That's where he starts these days, and then he repeats it on Twitter. This happened when Colombia's president Gustavo Petro, who was a bit of a revolutionary himself, used to be an armed guerrilla, and is also given to quite a bit of hyperbole himself, just like Trump. He had denied landing permission to US military aircraft bringing in illegal immigrants, saying that they were not treated with dignity. Because he denied permission to them, instead of letting be sorted out diplomatically, Trump immediately got into the act and imposed a 25% tariff on Colombia and said in 7 days, unless my wish is fulfilled, this will go up to 50%. This would completely destroy Colombia's economy. And Colombia, in spite of the fact that it is America's closest strategic ally in the American continent, they stepped back and allowed these planes to come in. Now, this was seen as a quick win by Donald Trump, and that's when he put out this image of himself. See this. This is Donald Trump, his self-image, looking like a gangster with a fedora hat. That's a familiar one. With that hat, with just one word there or one acronym there. And a lot of you will know that acronym. It's FAFO. The polite way of expanding this is fool around, find out. I know that fool is also a 4-letter word, but what Trump is referring to is the other 4-letter word which ends with K, not L. I cannot mention that in polite company, but that is the kind of presidency that Trump is running this time. So Colombia immediately stepped back, retreated. Trump sees that as a victory. And that, I suppose, emboldened him to move in on Canada, Mexico, and China as well. Now, Trump's method seems to be on foreign policy that he has dumped soft power. America over the decades has used both soft power and hard power. In fact, gunboat diplomacy, the whole idea, the concept, the metaphor came from American use of hard power. Trump, however, is saying that soft power is out. That's the reason he's attacked US Aid and many other such organizations, that I'm not going to do influence peddling by going and distributing money among the elites of my friendly countries or adversary countries anywhere. I will do it through hard power. Except his idea of hard power is not military. His idea of hard power is economic. And that is what he's trying to do. Now, what is his method? To understand his method, I'll take you to a quote by Steve Bannon. Steve Bannon was chief White House strategist, very controversial, fell out, got into a lot of trouble himself. Now, there is a quote from him in a show on PBS. PBS is Public Broadcasting Service. On the show Frontline, he says, and this is something that commentator Ezra Klein has referred to in his latest podcast and the column in New York Times, of which I will share a link with you with the description. Steve Bannon explains Trump's method, and I quote from him, "The opposition is the media." See, that's the important one. The opposition is the media. Mainly, that means that if you can keep the media off balance, your battle is won. The opposition is the media, and the media can only, because they are dumb and lazy, thank you, because they are dumb and lazy, they can only focus on one thing at a time. All we have to do is flood the zone. Every day we hit them with 3 things. They will bite on one and we'll get all other stuff done, all our stuff done. Bang, bang, bang. These guys will never recover. They will never be able to recover. But we've got to start with muzzle velocity. So we got to start, it got to hammer. That's what he says, and that's precisely what Trump is doing. Now, I will come back to the tariff issue in a couple of minutes because there are some deeper points there. But see, how many fronts has Trump opened up immediately within the first 2 weeks? on foreign policy. The three concern the neighbors, that is Canada, Mexico, and little bit further away, Panama. So Panama, Marco Rubio made his visit to Panama, and he's already got the president of Panama to say that he's going to review his BRICS deal with China and he's not going to renew it. Now, this deal was signed in 2017. That's when Panama actually made a big shift. Panama, until then, like some of the other countries in that zone, had recognized Taiwan, had relations with Taiwan. In 2017, they gave up their relations with Taiwan and recognized PRC, that is the Communist China, as the real China. It was at that point that Panama signed this BRI deal with China. Obviously, this is something that the Americans were not going to like, and the Americans were furious. Even the Biden administration was furious. The China in the process, Hutchison, the Chinese company, the Hong Kong company, but Hong Kong is now China. The Chinese will say it. Hong Kong is not a separate entity. When it suits the Chinese, they say it's a separate entity, but mostly they say this is as much China as any other part of mainland China. Now it's a Hong Kong company, Hutchison. Hutchison won the bids for two critical ports at the two ends of Panama Canal. Panama Canal in many ways is the jugular of America. See the map, what Panama Canal means to America. So if you want to go from this side of America, say from the east of America to the west of America, if you want to go from New York or Boston to say LA, San Francisco, San Diego, or to many other parts of southwestern America, then you have to cross the oceans. There's Atlantic on this side, on eastern side of the US, and the Pacific on the other. Between the Atlantic and the Pacific, there is the entire Southern American landmass that goes like this. This is not very different from the African landmass, where ships had to earlier go around the Cape of Good Hope, taking the long route until the Suez Canal was built. So just as Suez Canal shortened the distance between the Western world and Western markets, Asian markets and Australasia, etc., similarly, a way had to be found to connect America through a faster route, one with western half of itself, and second also for global shipping, American shipping, to provide a shorter route across the two oceans. That could only be done across the big, huge South American peninsula. That's where an isthmus was available, a very narrow territory that is now between Colombia and Panama. Earlier, it was a part of Colombia. 1903, Panama declared its independence. The Americans recognized Panamanian independence. In 2003, Panama became an independent country by announcing its secession from Colombia. That is something that Americans supported. As a result of this, a treaty was signed called Hay-Heron Treaty in 1903, according to which America acquired the rights to build this canal. So once this canal was built in Theodore Roosevelt's time, then this much shorter route became available, not just for American shipping to go from one side of America to the other, but also for global shipping. That's why Panama Canal became, between the Atlantic and the Pacific, was what the Suez Canal is between, say, the Mediterranean and then onwards to Atlantic and to the Indian Ocean. So this became one of the two choke points, two biggest man-made choke points in the world. That is the canal around which the Chinese have been building their activity, and that is what the Americans didn't like. So Chinese at one point decided to build, besides the fact that they got these two port concessions, they got some other concessions, now they've won another bid. These are all supposedly free bidding exercises, that just as Adani goes and bids for ports in other countries. But in this case, looks like the Chinese have been winning everything. So they also won the bid for building a cruise port for cruise shipping, pleasure cruise shipping. Also, they decided to build a huge embassy building, which would be oversized given the size of Panama, a huge embassy building overlooking the canal. So for America, it was worse than the Chinese rubbing their finger in their eye. This was really like, takes me back to that old Devanand Nutan film, Tere Ghar Ke Samne, Ek Ghar Banaunga. Remember that one? And that was also little bit like envy, because somebody builds a big, huge house. The guy living opposite him says, I'll build an even bigger house. And that leads to trouble between the two families. Of course, it's a Hindi film. So the boy from one family falls in love with the girl from the other family. One is Devan and the other is Nutan. This is not as romantic as that. In this case, the Americans came down like a ton of bricks and forbade Panama from allowing this. So that didn't happen. But Trump now wants something else. So one, he's got this commitment already that Panama will not extend BRI. And second, the Panama president is now indicating that he might find a way. We don't know. Nobody knows legally how it can be done. That he might find a way of cancelling these concessions that Chinese companies have got alongside Panama Canal, because the Americans see this as Chinese presence too close to them. And this gives China the power, although the Chinese soldiers are not there, but the Chinese are there. So this gives China the power to choke the canal, or at least that's how the Americans see it. Biden was dealing with it in a particular way. Trump is dealing with it in a different way. That is a Trump 2.0 way. And he's already seeing some results. Now come back to the tariff issue. What is Trump saying? What is Trump's spokesperson saying? That is Caroline Leavitt, 27-year-old White House spokesperson. She's saying that all these three countries, Mexico, Canada, and China, they are all responsible for unfettered, unrestricted flow of fentanyl into the US. Now, fentanyl is a deadly opioid. It's actually a very useful drug. It's a very useful drug for pain control, used in surgeries, used with cancer patients, used in trauma, used for accidents, is used by armies for battle casualties for immediate relief of pain. But used in larger doses, this can be lethal. How poisonous is fentanyl? It is 50 times more poisonous than heroin and 100 times more poisonous than morphine. So just 2 milligrams, which is just the amount that you put on the tip of a pencil, that is more than bad enough. I don't want to say good enough, more than bad enough to kill a human being. Now, tons of this is being smuggled into the US, because in the US it's being heavily misused. It's also heavily prescribed. It's also overprescribed, because the belief in the US is that medical business or pharma business in cahoots with doctors is overprescribing these drugs. People are getting addicted. So people are using too much of it. So that's one side of it. What's killing people most of all, this overprescription is getting people addicted to this, because this is also a strong sedative. As people are getting more addictive, this is now becoming a favorite drug in America, in Canada as well. And it is not made there. It is made with a bunch of ingredients which are not made either in America or in Canada or in Mexico. These ingredients are almost entirely made in China. In fact, we had featured this in a full episode of Cut The Clutter in 2023, of which I will share a link with you. Now, those ingredients, first of all, the implication is that those ingredients are allowed to be shipped, allowed to be transported or exported by the Chinese without any restrictions. That is something that Joe Biden had taken up with Xi Jinping at their last meeting in San Francisco in 2023. That is what it triggered that earlier episode of Cut the Clutter. Now, Trump is saying, all right, you are allowing these ingredients to come in, and in Canada, you are cooking up fentanyl using these ingredients. Then these ingredients are mixed with some other things so that you can make it like a tablet which has a tiny wee bit of fentanyl but looks like any other tablet, so nobody can tell what this is. Now, those factories exist in Canada, in Mexico, and in the US as well. The basic thing is to get either the ingredients of fentanyl to be smuggled in, or fentanyl itself to be smuggled in, packaged as some other pharmaceuticals. That's happening in a big way through the borders in Mexico. That is the dominant source of fentanyl into America, but also from Canada. It's not as dominant as that if you look at the customs seizures at the border, but there are people in Canada who would tell you that it's not just the seizures. That's because 13,700 trucks every day, and these are giant 18-wheel trucks, 13,700 trucks every day go from Canada into the US, because that is the size of exports that the Canadians have into the US. And those trucks are impossible to check, and that is where a lot of this smuggling is taking place, and people are getting caught not at the border, but people are getting caught deeper inside America, where truckers were arrested in Indiana in America with a large consignment of fentanyl, and where the trucker, the driver, who's of Indian origin, Indian immigrant, he has filed a plea deal now, admitting to his guilt. And there are many other cases like that. And the implication is that there is a lot of it coming in but not getting caught at the border. Nevertheless, the nexus is clear. The nexus is ingredients come from China. They might be cooked in Canada. They might be cooked in Mexico on illegal labs. And from there, this is being transported into America. And this then gets combined with illegal immigration, which is a much bigger problem from Mexico than from Canada, but it's a problem from Canada as well. Combined with that, and that's how these complicated triads or complicated gangs come into being. These are gangs of drug runners and human traffickers as well. India, in fact, is a big victim of that, because that is where human trafficking in India comes from, and that is where human trafficking, of which India is a victim, and tens of thousands, in fact lakhs of Indians are victims. That is where it gets financed. So Trump is going after all three of them, the maker of the ingredients and the two countries where some of it is cooked and through which it is smuggled into the US. I will quote from Caroline Leavitt, the White House spokesperson, and she says, I will share a link with you also of her statement. She says, both means Canada and Mexico, both have allowed unprecedented invasion of illegal fentanyl plus illegal immigrants across our southern borders. And then she says China is also equally involved. And she says the tariffs are laid for the illegal fentanyl they've allowed, threatening tens of millions of people. And she says Trudeau should not make these outlandish statements threatening America with counter tariffs. On the other hand, he should speak with President Trump. So once again, I told you, Trump does all of this, but he also leaves scope for negotiation and concessions. That's what's happened with Panama as well. There's a method to Trump's madness. Just this Sunday, just after the tariffs were ordered, he said, China is running the Panama Canal. It was not given to China. It was given to Panama foolishly. But they violated the agreement and we are going to take it back, or something powerful is going to happen. So that was a threat, and soon enough, Marco Rubio landed in Panama, and we've seen the results already. Similarly, he's used the same shock and awe with Denmark and the Europeans over Greenland as well. So once again, it's not as if Denmark is going to hand over Greenland to him, or he's sending his navy to take back Greenland. But already the Europeans are talking a different language. So NATO Secretary General and former Prime Minister of Netherlands, Mark Rutte has said that Trump has been right many times. We need to dialogue with him. And he says he appreciates the fact that the Prime Minister of Denmark, Mette Frederiksen, has not acted with hostility to Trump's ideas, but is willing to engage with Trump. And he says it doesn't matter who rules or who controls Greenland. What matters is that the Arctic stays safe. Now, this is something that we had spoken about the last time, that with global warming, with the melting of glaciers, the Arctic route is now opening up, and that's opening up for the Russians as well as the Chinese from the other side. And that is something that the Western world is worried about, the Americans are worried about. And that is where you can see already that the Europeans, after immediate hostile and angry reactions and also great amounts of concern as if the US Navy was coming in to take Greenland, is now looking at things differently. So you can say that so far, if Trump looks at his score sheet so far, he would say, so far so good, simply because in everything that he has done, he's left room for maneuver and room for negotiation. Even on Canada, although he doesn't like Trudeau very much, and I think it's quite mutual between them. At the same time, we know where the power lies right now. Even there, his spokesperson, Caroline Leavitt, is saying that Trudeau should speak with Donald Trump. Although I see some indications or some quote-unquote rumors in the Washington press that Trump is refusing to take his phone calls. But I told you he doesn't like Trudeau. Again, J.D. Vance, the vice president, he's also hinted that the issue is illegal immigration and fentanyl smuggling, drug smuggling. And Canada needs to address that first instead of retaliating, etc. So in all of these cases, you can see that Trump is offering a deal, but he is offering a deal on his terms. So far, in some of these, Colombia, Panama, the two weakest countries he took on, they have already given in. Mexico and Canada are talking, and I think in the course of time, you will find some kind of a negotiated solution there as well, and Trump will be able to claim a victory immediately. China, I don't know. Let us see how Xi Jinping responds to this, but other countries are already making adjustments at their end. Look at our own budget. Our own budget this time lowers customs duty, tariffs on many things. Trump has been calling us tariff kings. One of the products on which customs or tariffs have been lowered in India is Harley Davidson motorcycles. Remember, in his last term, that was a big issue because I think the guy who owns Harley Davidson is a friend of his or somebody he knows, and he might have made a promise that I will have tariffs lowered on you. These are 1600cc plus big motorbikes. On that one in this budget, Government of India has already on its own lowered tariffs from 60% to 40%. Maybe when Trump and Modi meet, there'll be further negotiation and it will come down further. So you might be able to buy cheaper Harley Davidson. If that happens, you will once again know how Trump has come up with this new idea of global strategic power projection using trade and economics as a hard power instead of his military.